So it looks like I have an update that was given to me left here. It's titled Hog Update. So feral hogs have a weight of 150 to 300 pounds, 2,000 hogs, not grain-fed, but Iowa hogs, with a Chicago market exchange price of 55 cents per pound. Says that it's more money than Jack could raise. And then as far as the square footage goes, I'm not sure that I'm in complete agreement with it, but it's reducing my estimate down to like a quarter of an acre for 2,000 hogs. I'm not sure. I have a quarter of an acre on my front yard. There were 12 turkeys on my front lawn this morning that the dog was barking at, and 12 turkeys on a quarter of an acre. I couldn't imagine 2,000 turkeys, so I'm not sure. I'm gonna still go with my space, between. But I think it's fun. It's fun that sermon illustrations are remembered and used and thought about. It should be that way.
That's fake news, Joe.
It's fake news? I don't know. I have a joke, but I'm not going to. It'll totally be in the wrong direction. So we've been going through this Gospel of Mark. And so far, twice, we've looked at this idea where Mark, the author, starts a story, inserts a story in the middle of that story, and then finishes that story. We saw it with Jesus' family, talking about Jesus' family going to meet him, insert the story of the Pharisees confronting Jesus, finish with Jesus' family coming to see him. We saw that with Jairus' daughter. The story starts with Jairus' daughter, and then we see the woman that was bleeding for the 12 years inserted in, and then the completion of Jairus' story. Mark's done that twice, and now we hit the 6th chapter, and he does it again. So 6 chapters, 3 different times, he starts telling a story, he inserts a story, and then he finishes the story. And so we've been starting to think about how is it that he does this? Why does he do that? And the thought is that he's connecting them together intentionally, and it's for us to discover why he's doing that. So today, we're going to look at this amount of scripture in the Gospel of Mark. We begin with Jesus at home, where Jesus returns to Nazareth, and this is an account of what happens when Jesus returns to Nazareth. So we're going to dig into that more. This is just the higher level, 30,000 foot view. And then he moves into this story of sending out the 12, sending them out to proclaim, to confront evil, to heal, and to teach what Jesus has been teaching. He sends 12 out. And then the story stops there and starts again and finishes there. And the big question today is, what is he doing in between? Why does he stick this story of John the Baptist there? He could have moved the red section on the bottom up to the top, made it nice and clean, and then told the story of John the Baptist if he wanted to tell something different. But Mark chooses to sandwich the story of a plate in the middle. And there, if you're questioning what the sign is about, the plate is actually a sandwich. The plate has been sandwiched in. The story of John the Baptist and his head being delivered on a plate is sandwiched in between these two things of Jesus sending out disciples. And our question as we walk through this is, why? Why is he intentionally sticking that in? Well, we'll get there. So let's start with this first part, Jesus being at home. So this is what we're looking at now on a smaller scale. Jesus left there and went to his hometown, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. Something happens right now. What happens right now changes the course of things, and Mark talks about the Sabbath no more. Mark doesn't have Jesus in the Sabbath setting again. The Sabbath isn't even mentioned by Mark again until after Jesus has been crucified and he's in the grave, and the women go after attending the synagogue to anoint the body with the oil. So Mark stops. The synagogue stops. We don't even know that Jesus returns. It seems as though Jesus doesn't return to Nazareth again after what happened that we're going to look at right now. Where? Now remember, he's in his hometown. He's back in North Brookfield. Think of it as he grew up in North Brookfield and he's been away and he's back in North Brookfield. Where did this man get these things? They asked. So first question, where did he get these things? What's this wisdom that's been given to him? And he even does miracles. Look at all the questions. Isn't he the carpenter? What's the big fuss? Isn't this the Jesus that grew up here? Isn't he like Mary's son, the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us? It's like Jesus is performing miracles, and what we've been seeing is he's been drawing crowds of people, so much so that he has to sit in a boat to not be pushed into the ocean. He goes, wherever he goes, people are hearing him, and he goes home, and he gets the third degree. Isn't this the carpenter's son? And the next verse is perplexing to me. They took offense at him. Jesus said to him, only in his hometown, among his relatives and his own house, is a prophet without honor. And we've often quoted that. That's something we often say, is a prophet is never honored or welcomed in his own home. This is where that comes from. But it strikes me that they took offense at him. What's the offense? Healing people who are not well? Raising someone from the dead? Forgiving sins? Well, that might be offensive if he's just Jesus from Nazareth. And then it says he could not do any miracles there except lay hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their lack of faith. Then Jesus went around teaching from village to village. Now, people have written a lot of stuff about this, that Jesus only can do miracles if people have faith. Let me just set records straight. Jesus doesn't need your faith to perform a miracle. Jesus doesn't need you present to perform a miracle. Jesus doesn't need that. Jesus can perform a miracle anywhere, but it seems he chooses to do miracles around faith. Either faith begins the circle of a miracle, or the miracle produces faith. So either faith helps in the process of the miracle, or the miracle produces faith, but in the end, it's Jesus that's doing the work. It's not our faith, it's Jesus' actions. So, in my ministry on campus, I find that there is still this same kind of confusion about God. Who is God? Who is Jesus? And the same kind of questions that were being asked in Nazareth by the skeptical people are asked on campus. In fact, it's asked in our workplaces, it's asked in our neighborhoods, it's asked everywhere we go. And this is a video that we did a few years ago, students on a campus, and here's some questions that they've asked.
I mean, it's nice to have something to believe in, I guess, but I don't think so.
I definitely think it's important to have God on the back burner. Religion, I don't think is as important. You can do the right thing without other people telling you you're doing the right thing.
My classmates didn't really have a clue about the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, and if they did, they didn't really see it affecting them personally.
I don't think a lot of people really have any higher power that they believe in and that they stick to truly. That's what I believe.
My sense of hope, it's definitely been outside sources, friends, family members. You really can't get through life. I mean, like that phrase, "No man is an island." Like you can't get through life without depending on others.
I guess that depends on the individual. You know, it's no matter who or what your God is for you.
I don't know. What I want to say is I don't think that should, like, religion should be the one thing that gives you hope, if that makes any sense. You know, I don't personally go to church. I don't really, like, believe in a God per se.
He definitely existed. He definitely, I think, revolutionized 2,000 years worth of history and worth of culture and worth of thought. And that alone, I think, if not a god, then definitely godlike for what he did, I think, for humanity for the past 2,000 years.
I believe he was in history, but I think he's like one of the most famous ancient blue-collar men. Because all you know are like Caesar, Alexander the Great. But I don't know if he is a god, if he's just a prophet, or if he was like a con man, because it depends on who you're talking to. Are you talking to somebody with the Jewish faith, Muslim faith, or Christianity? Because all three of those go to that. So it's hard. I think he is a historical figure, but not really as much a religious figure.
I don't really think people are as into Christianity as maybe their parents wanted them to be, or this environment allows them to be. I think they're more focused on going to school and partying and having a good time. But I mean, that's, you know, all depends on the person, so we can't really judge.
They believe in themselves. They don't believe in a higher God or Jesus. Even if they do, they're so wrapped up in like what other people are gonna think and what other people are gonna see them as doing that they don't even take time to, you know, to praise their God. I know people that don't even pray because they're afraid of what their roommate is gonna say about them.
Confusion in Jesus' day about who Jesus is. There was this confusion on the campus. Perhaps even this confusion sitting here with us. I mean, today, who is Jesus? If that's you, if you're the skeptic, I'm glad you're here. Nobody wants to say, don't come. Everyone is saying, keep coming. Think about things, work through things. That's what we do with our faith. There's confusion also in the middle of the story, which we'll see as far as who Jesus is as well. So it's not just among Jesus' hometown. But here now we're going to look at this part of the story, not the middle part yet. So the yellow line there, that's where I bridged the two of them together as though it was just the one story. So calling the 12 to him, he sent them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over evil spirits. And that kind of comes from Deuteronomy, where it says that the testimony of 2 people is valid. And so sending them out by 2 lines up with the testimony. These were the instructions. Take nothing on your journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in your belts. Wear sandals, but an extra tunic. So Jesus is saying, I'm sending you out, but I don't want you to take anything with you. I want you to be relying on your faith, relying on me to sustain you, relying on what I've taught you. Jesus is sending them out. But it doesn't stay this way. I think we have to be careful. We're reading the Gospel of Mark, but later on we find that Jesus sends them out with money, sends them out with things. So this isn't a long-lasting thing, but the idea of depending on Christ is. Whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave that town. And if any place you will not welcome you or listen to you, shake the dust off your feet when you leave as a testimony against them. I think this is kind of in response to Jesus being rejected at his home. I think perhaps he took the sandals off his feet and dusted them off too as he exited Nazareth. Now, here's what happened is that when someone Jewish entered into Gentile land, into Gentile soil, when they would step back into their home turf, they would take their shoes off and dust it off. You know, it's an insult to say, you're not a believer, you're not one of us. And Jesus is turning that custom around and insulting people who are not believing. They went out and preached that people should repent. They drove out many demons and anointed many sick people with oil and healed them. So they're confronting evil. Jesus sends them out. He gives them authority over evil spirits, and he sends them out to confront evil spirits, and they do. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all that they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." Boy, does that sound attractive. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. We'll see next week it doesn't work out that well for them as far as getting rest and quiet in a solitary place. So that's what's on the outside. That's the bread, I guess, to the sandwich. Why is Jesus doing this? Well, if we look at Jesus when he called the disciples, you know, I think of Peter. When he calls Peter, he says, "Come with me, and I will teach you to be a fisher of men." So from the very beginning, Jesus calls people with the intent to send people. And so I've often used this terminology in ministry, and so I share this with you today. This is part of my vision, part of my strategy, but it's not mine, it's Jesus's. So here's what I think. I think that if you see me do something, I do, and you watch, that's pretty safe. But then we have to move to a point where we do it together if I'm helping you understand things of the gospel. And then we get to the place where you do and I watch. Yesterday, I did, in between working on the sermon, David and I did breaks on his car. So I did one side. I did a lot of talking. I explained a lot of things. And so I did. And as we were doing it, he was watching. But then we got to the place where we were doing stuff together. And then what happened to the other side of the car? Yeah. You did it. So, and I watched. And so we do that kind of thing in life. If you're an apprentice to something, you know, Paul, how does it work as being an electrician? You watch people, then you start doing things, and then they watch you do things, right? That's the way we model teaching. That's just what Jesus has been doing all through his ministry. He's calling people, and then he's sending them out in the same kind of format. But there's a disconnect somewhere, because I just did some more math that you can correct me on. So here's some thought. So 12 people in 3 years. What if each one of us in the next 3 years truly invested and poured into 12 people's lives, just like Jesus did with the 12 apostles? How did it work out? You know, how could it work out? So if one person invests for 3 years in 12 people, and then I'm not reinstating the others, because I'm figuring some of you might not make it to the span that I'm going through. But just to show you some of the math, okay? So in 3 years, we'd have 12 people. 3 years later, we'd have 144 people. 3 years later, 1728. 3 years later, we would surpass the population of the Brookfields. 12 years. 12 years later, we'd hit 250,000. 3 more years later, 3 million people. 3 more years, 36 million people. 3 more years, 430 million. The population of the United States, 325 million. I counted this morning before I came. But can we just for a second grasp that in 24 years, if we truly did what Jesus did and only did it with 12 and then backed away, we would totally reach the population of the United States, eliminating things like selfishness and greed and poverty and the dysfunction and the malpractice of everything that's out there. In 24 years, we could see the entire globe changed as a result, because just 3 years later than that, and you're at 1.3 billion, and in 3 more years, the world. The world. But Jesus has been gone for 2,000 years, and Christianity is declining in America. And maybe that's got something to do with the middle. Maybe that has something to do with why why Mark put this story in the middle. So let's look at this idea of John the Baptist quickly. King Herod's not a nice guy. King Herod heard about this, heard about what Jesus was doing. For Jesus' name had become well known. Some were saying, and here's the confusion again, some were saying John the Baptist is raised from the dead, and that's why his miraculous powers are at work. Others were saying he's Elijah, and still others claim that he's a prophet, like one of the prophets of long ago. So there's this confusion that's going on, but Herod picks up one of those answers and hangs on to it. But when Herod heard this, he said, John, the man I beheaded, has been raised from the dead. For Herod himself has given orders for John to have been arrested, and he had him bound and put in prison. And now the story starts to unfold. Now, remember back in chapter 1, I said that there was a theme throughout Mark of being handed over. John was handed over. Jesus was handed over. And we find that the people who are receiving this letter, the Christians in Rome under Nero's persecution, are continuously being handed over. There's this theme. And when when Mark writes that they were handed over, when the audience reads that, they identify with it. So Mark in chapter 1 said that John was handed over. Hasn't mentioned John more since then. So here we find the rest of the story. He did this because Herodias, I'll say Herodias, that's what I've always said, it's probably wrong. His brother Philip's wife, whom he married, for John had been saying to Herod, it's not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. So Herodias nursed a grudge against John and wanted to kill him. Let's just try to give you a picture of Herod's family. So Herod the Great, who was the Herod that was around when Jesus was born and that killed all the infants, Herod the Great had 10 wives. 10. The fourth wife is this Herod's mother. Does that make sense? It won't much longer. So one of the other wives has a son. That son has a daughter. That's who this Herod is marrying. It's a half niece. But the half-niece was married to another half-uncle. And so in order for Herod to marry her, she had to divorce the other half-uncle to be able to be married to this half-uncle. It's dysfunction junction. So that's kind of where things are, and they did this often to keep power. But Herod was married to some king of Arabia's daughter, some king in Arabia's daughter. Cost him dearly. You know, there was an attack later on based on all of that. His life is a mess, but he was infatuated with his niece, so much so that he wanted to marry her, and he did. And John speaks out against it. John says, that's not right. And so he finds himself in prison, and Herodias nurses a grudge against him. She wants to kill him. But she wasn't able to because Herod feared John and protected him, knowing him to be a righteous and holy man. When Herod heard John, he was greatly puzzled, yet he liked to listen to him. Seems as though Herod is the person on that rocky soil, you know, that just, or the path that can't grow. There's no soil happening, but he's interested. Something sprouts up, but it's gone. Finally, the opportune time came. On his birthday, Herod gave a banquet for, now listen to who he's got, high officials, military commanders, and leading men in Galilee. This is a political meeting. He's got all of the movers and the shakers of his kingdom all around him for a big party. And that's the setting. This is the opportunity that finally came when the daughter of Herodias came in and danced. So this would be his stepdaughter, or you could say it was his great niece. Well, she comes in. When the daughter of Herodias came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his dinner guests. Now, we don't know what kind of dance it was. We don't know if it was a cute little dance, but our guess is no. It pleased all Herod and his dinner guests. The king said to the girl, "Ask me for anything you want and I'll give it to you." And he promised her with an oath, "Whatever you ask, I'll give you up to half of my kingdom." Now let's just put it out on the table. Herod doesn't promise anyone a sliver of his kingdom. Herod kills people who threaten his kingdom. This is more of a way of just saying, ask me for something big. But if she ever said, okay, I'll take this half, she'd be dead. So he wasn't offering her half of the kingdom, but he is offering her something in front of a lot of influential people. So she goes out and said to her mother, "What shall I ask for?" And the response is, "The head of John the Baptist," she answered. Let that sink in. I talked about the father-son moment that Dave and I had yesterday in the car. You know, I do, we do, he watches, you know, and then he does, and then I watch. And that plays out in life. What kind of scenario, what kind of scripting is Herodias giving her daughter to come out and dance in a way that pleases all of the men? To go back and ask, and then she says, perfect. Go back out there and tell him you want the head of John the Baptist. So the head of John the Baptist, she answered. At once the girl hurried into the king with the request. She wasn't gone long. The Jeopardy song hadn't even ended. I want to I want you to give me right now the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Interestingly, the Greek pays attention to word order, and in the Greek, the word order is leaving the head of John the Baptist at the end. Literally, the way the Greek text reads is, I want you to give me on a platter right now. I wonder if she put a pause in there. Everyone listening and watching, what does she want on a platter? This is a huge banquet that's going on, and I want you right now to give to me on a platter the head of John the Baptist. That's how the sentence ends. The king was greatly distressed, but because of his oaths and his dinner guests, emphasize dinner guests. He'd break an oath. Herod broke oaths. Herod couldn't be trusted. That's why Herodias wants the head. She wants to know that he did kill John the Baptist and didn't just say that he did it. And so here, he would have broken that oath, but he can't because he's going to be shamed into it. He's being pressured by the political issues around. If Herod allows John to live at this point, then Herod loses a grip on his kingdom. So he immediately sent an executioner with orders to bring John's head. The man went, beheaded John in prison, and brought back his head on a platter. He presented it to the girl. She gave it to her mother. On hearing this, John's disciples came and took his body and laid it in a tomb. So why is that story snuggled inside the idea of sending the 12 disciples out to confront evil, to proclaim the gospel, to heal the sick? Why is that there? Again, we have to think about who it was written to. Mark's gospel is being first delivered to and read in the midst of great persecution. Nero is lighting Christians up as human torches to light his garden in the evening. Nero is feeding Christians to the wild beasts in the Colosseum. Nero is executing Christians left and right. And this letter, this gospel, this good news that is saying the king is coming, there's a new victor, his kingdom is advancing, and it's our responsibility to align with the king and to bring others into alignment with the king. And those who don't align with the king have consequences to deal with. That's what the gospel means, and that's what they were reading. They were reading Mark's plea to align with the king, the new victor, Jesus Christ. And so they're reading this likely in the dark, in candlelight, in fear, and they get to the place where John the Baptist is being taken out. He's beheaded. They're reading this like we would watch it on TV because their imagination isn't corrupted by having to have multimedia, sound and all of the different effects to it. They're reading this and they are shocked and they're angered and they're hurt and they're outraged at what has happened. And why does he stick it in the middle like that? Because I think they can understand the parallels. There's many different parallels that are happening here between the life of Christ. Look at this. Both John and Jesus are passionate about their message. Both John and Jesus are abnormally born. They're conceived in a miraculous way. They both have passion. They both are proclaiming a message of repentance. They are both arrested over this same message of turning around and following God. They are both innocent. They are both plotted against by people. Jesus by the Pharisees and the religious leaders, and they're both plotted against. They're both executed under pressure by tyrants and government. They're both both of their bodies are gathered by the disciples after they leave, after he's dead. I read that when I'm reading that, and I'm saying that John's disciples came and got the body and buried him. And I think that's what Joseph of Arimathea did to Jesus. And they're reading and they're rereading this letter over and over again, and they're starting to put pieces together. The more that they read it, the more times through it that they read it, the more they're starting to see, and they're seeing that Jesus went through the same thing as John, and then they're grasping that, wait a minute, we're going through the same things that Jesus went through. We're going through the same things that John went through. We are in the midst of persecution, and Jesus is saying to us through Mark, I sent you out, and I know these things will happen. And I'm putting it in the middle of this story so you understand that it's part of the story. When I send you out, these things may happen. But don't get stuck. Don't get stuck with what's on the platter. The message continued. In John's case, the message continued. In Jesus' case, the message continued. In the people in Rome reading this for the first time, the message continues. And in our case, the message continues. What's on our plate? What's on your plate? What is it that makes you stall out? Because Jesus might just be willing to insert that into your story. If he's called you, he's sending you. If he's called you, he is sending you. Why are you not going? It's clear that we're not. And I'm not picking on any individual. I'm saying if in 25 years we could reach the globe, and 2,000 years we're in decline, then we're stalled out. Maybe when they read that, maybe when they read about John, they were outraged. Maybe they were upset enough to do something about it. A mother loses a child to a drunk driver, and they start something called Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and they're out to make a difference so that never happens again. They're going to pursue something. When someone gets cancer and they die of cancer, then we don't quit fighting for a cure, and we don't just give up. And Ken is walking for a walk to raise funds for cancer while he's wrestling with cancer because he wants to do something more and to make a statement. I wonder if when they read this that they were outraged enough to say, I want to do something more. I want to energize, this passion, this anger to a godly thing, to confront evil and to bring people just like the disciples were. That's why this is in the middle. That's why this story is there. I've shared with you that when I had my wisdom teeth taken out, that it ended up with a heart condition being added in. When I was just in my very early 20s, I have a heart condition that they know nothing about. They don't know whether it's dangerous or not dangerous or anything about it. But I know it scared the life out of me. It scared the life out of me in the sense that I stopped doing things. But it brought me to faith. My heart condition made me aware of my heart's condition. It brought me to faith. But then I was crippled by it. What was on my plate? It was this heart condition thing. I remember being challenged to play out at a coffee house a few songs, and I only played songs on my couch. I wrote songs about my faith, and I played them on my couch at home. And Annie and I went to a coffee house that ended up networking me into so many things that brought me to being here, honestly. But I remember after a number of months, I was challenged to play an opening 3 songs for this group that was playing. And my heart went nuts because it's electrical. It goes crazy if I get nerved up or stressed out. And so I didn't do for a number of years anything that would stress me out. I stopped working out. I stopped exercising. I stopped anything that would make my heart go fast. I played songs. I played 3 songs, and it was a piece of cake. Life was happily ever after. No. My heart went nuts while I was playing, and it went nuts for the next 3 days before I was able to even begin to feel right. And I said this: I'm not doing that ever again, God. That is not on the plate. A number of months went by, and some artist who became a friend, he came out and he played this song. And he used to use reverb and echoing. You know, he'd step on something and he'd say something, and then that phrase would echo as he was playing it. And he played this song, and I don't remember the exact words, but this I remember. The phrase that kept echoing was, "Let's get going." And the words around it was something like, "I'm sorry that I've put my fears in front of things. I'm sorry that I've been inactive. I'm sorry that I haven't been doing the things that you called me to do." And then this echo, "Let's get going. Let's get going. Let's get going. Let's get going." It just kept on in this haunting sound that funneled straight into my brain. And I had literally tears began to flow down my face. And I said, "I'm sorry, God, I can't do it. I can't keep doing this. My heart, I'm saying, that was what was on my plate. I can't do it, God." But I ended by saying, "I will. But you've got to give me the strength. I can't do it without you. You've got to give me the strength to get going." And he did. And I played out again. And you want to know something? My heart went nuts for 3 days straight afterwards. Like, I thought this was over. You know, I said yes, you said okay. And I played out again, and it went crazy for 3 days straight. And I played again, and it went crazy. And eventually it was 2 days, and eventually it was at this place where I loved to stand in front of people and proclaim this message, because we need to get going. What's on your plate? What is it that's got you stalled out? If God were writing this scripture in your heart right now, and he's called you and he's sending you out, and there's something in the middle that's in the way, something in the middle that's terrorizing you, fill in the blank. And let's get going. Let's pray. I don't even know how to pray, Lord. But I know there are things on my plate today that I wrestle with. I know there are things on the plates of those here today that are a struggle. But I know that you have called us and you have sent us, and that hasn't changed. Help us to get going. Help us to get going. Let's get going. In your strength, through your power and your grace. Amen.